I'm an ordinary person. I live in the United States, work a regular job, and I don't believe in exaggerating stories. What I'm about to tell you happened exactly as I remember it.
It was a normal night.
Nothing special. No bad feeling when I left my house. I just needed to stop by Walmart after work to grab a few things. Milk.
Bread.
Some paper towels. The kind of trip I had done hundreds of times before. I was in my late 20s then, working full-time, and usually shopping late to avoid crowds. This Walmart was open late and sat near a main road, bright lights, big parking lot, always felt safe. That's why I chose it. Inside, everything looked normal. Families finishing up their shopping. Employees restocking shelves. The low hum of the air system and distant beeping from checkout scanners. Nothing about the place felt wrong. I remember pushing my cart slowly, scrolling on my phone, not paying much attention to anyone around me. It was just another stop before going home. Another forgettable night. But there was one small thing that didn't fit. As I walked past the end of an aisle, I noticed someone standing still between the shelves. They weren't shopping. They weren't on their phone. They were just standing there, half hidden by stacked boxes, facing my direction. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Walmart attracts all kinds of people. Someone waiting for a family member. Someone tired. Someone thinking. I kept walking. A few aisles later, I noticed the same person again. Same distance. Same position. Not close enough to be obvious. Not far enough to ignore. That's when I felt it. Not fear. Just awareness. The kind of feeling you get when you realize you're being watched, even though nothing bad has happened yet. My pace slowed without me meaning to. I pretended to look at items I didn't need. When I stopped, the person stopped. When I moved, they moved. Still, I didn't panic. I told myself I was overthinking it. Walmart was full of cameras. Full of people. Nothing dangerous could happen here. But as I turned my cart toward the back of the store, I realized something else. The aisles around me were getting emptier. The sounds felt farther away. And the person behind me wasn't pretending anymore. They weren't browsing. They weren't hiding.
They were following me.
And the scariest part wasn't what they did next. It was the realization that whatever they were planning, they had already decided on me before I ever noticed them. The Walmart I went to was one of the bigger ones in my city. High ceilings, bright fluorescent lights, wide aisles, and the usual buzz of carts and scanners. It sat near a highway exit, so it always had a mix of locals and travelers. From the outside, it looked completely ordinary. Nothing about it screamed danger. It was a Tuesday night, around 10:30 p.m. The store wasn't crowded, but not empty either. A few families were finishing their shopping, some teenagers wandered with snacks in hand, and employees moved between shelves, restocking and tidying. The hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant beep of checkout scanners created a monotonous background noise, the kind that normally makes a store feel safe. I was there for a simple reason: groceries. Milk, eggs, a loaf of bread, some cleaning supplies. Nothing important, just routine. I had finished a long shift at work and wanted to get in and out without dealing with crowds. That's why I preferred this time to shop, late at night, the aisles quiet, the store manageable. I remember walking through the produce section first. The lights reflected off the polished tiles, making everything feel brighter than it was. I passed a couple restocking the shelves and nodded politely. Everyone looked normal. Smiling.
Tired.
Normal. As I moved toward the household aisle, I noticed the subtle details: the cold draft near the exit doors, the faint smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with fried food from the deli. Nothing alarming, just the usual background details you don't think about when shopping. There were a few employees nearby. One young woman was pushing a cart full of returned items toward the back room. Another man in a blue vest was arranging cans on the shelves, humming quietly. Their presence was comforting. They reminded me that even at this late hour, the store had staff moving around, and nothing should feel threatening. I even briefly smiled at a small child sitting in a cart with their parent. The child waved, and I waved back. For a moment, everything felt completely normal. I didn't notice the small oddities yet. Not the shadow lingering near the end of an aisle. Not the man who seemed out of place, standing too still between the shelves. Not the quiet way. The store felt emptier than it should have been for this hour. At this point, I was just a normal customer, following a normal routine. I pushed my cart toward the next aisle, thinking only about what I needed to buy. The mundane comfort of normal life had lulled me into believing that nothing in this store could be dangerous. Little did I know, by the time I reached the cleaning supplies aisle, the normalcy of that Walmart night would begin to unravel. And that small, subtle feeling of being watched would grow into something I couldn't ignore. I pushed my cart down the household aisle, my list in hand, and at first, everything felt normal. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. The shelves were neatly stocked. The distant beeping of checkout scanners mixed with muffled announcements over the PA system. Then I noticed something unusual. A section of the aisle was darker than the rest. One of the overhead lights flickered, intermittently, casting long shadows between the shelves. It wasn't enough to make me stop, but it caught my attention. I slowed down my pace. The quiet hum of the store seemed to drop a little, as if the noise itself had been swallowed. I could hear my shoes squeak faintly on the polished tile. Then, behind me, there was another sound. It was subtle at first, a soft scrape, like fabric brushing against metal. I froze. I told myself it was probably a cart or a customer passing by. But when I glanced back, the aisle behind me was empty. I kept walking, trying not to think too much about it. That's when I felt it, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The kind of awareness you get when something isn't quite right. It wasn't fear yet, not really. Just unease. I passed another end cap and noticed movement in my peripheral vision. A shadow shifting between the shelves. Too quick to be someone browsing, too deliberate to be an accident. I turned, and no one was there. Then came the faint noise, footsteps.
Slow. Light.
Not matching the rhythm of any customer walking a normal aisle. I paused. My cart rolled slightly forward, hitting a shelf. The sound echoed louder than I expected. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I exhaled slowly, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But the quiet didn't feel right anymore. The store felt emptier than before, almost hollow. I continued, but the unease didn't leave. A shadow moved again, just at the edge of an aisle. Not the shadow of an object, but a person. I couldn't see clearly, only the outline, but it was enough to make my heart rate tick up. Then I noticed something else. Every time I turned my head, it felt like the shadow mirrored me. When I paused, it paused. When I moved, it moved. Too far to be normal. Too precise. I told myself it was impossible. There were cameras everywhere. Employees everywhere. Nothing could be wrong. But still, that creeping sensation lingered. Something about the way the aisles felt colder, the shadows longer, the silence heavier, told me I was being watched. And even though nothing had touched me, nothing had spoken to me, I knew one thing. Whatever it wasn't just in the store by accident.
It was following me.
And it wasn't going away. I stopped pretending nothing was wrong. The feeling in my chest had changed from mild unease to something heavier. My instincts were telling me to pay attention now. I turned my cart into another aisle, not because I needed anything there, but to see if the movement behind me would follow. I slowed my pace. I pretended to read labels. I stopped completely. A few seconds passed. Then I heard it. Footsteps entering the aisle behind me. They were careful, measured,
Not the random pace of someone shopping.
Each step sounded placed on purpose. I didn't turn around right away. I watched the reflection in the glass door of a freezer across the aisle. A figure appeared behind me.
A man.
He stayed at the far end of the aisle, pretending to look at something on the shelf, but his head wasn't angled toward the products. It was angled toward me. Even in the reflection, I could tell his eyes weren't moving. I pushed my cart forward again. The footsteps followed. That's when I felt trapped. The aisles around me had fewer people now. The employees I'd seen earlier were gone, probably in the back or helping customers up front. The steady noise of the store felt distant, like I was standing in a bubble where sound didn't travel properly. I picked up a random item and placed it in my cart just to look normal. My hands were shaking slightly. I told myself to walk toward the front of the store, but my legs felt heavy, like they didn't want to move fast. I turned another corner. He turned with me. This time, he was closer. Close enough that I could hear his breathing. Slow and controlled. Close enough that I could smell something faint and sour, like unwashed clothes. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. I glanced toward the end of the aisle, hoping to see someone. Anyone. But the space beyond the shelves was empty. The lights there seemed dimmer, casting thick shadows that felt like walls closing in. I considered leaving my cart and running, but panic made my thoughts slow. I didn't know where to go. The exits felt far away. The store suddenly felt too big, too open, yet impossible to escape. I sped up. The footsteps behind me sped up too. I could hear them clearly now. No more hiding. No more pretending. He wasn't trying to look like a shopper anymore. He was following me. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I realized then that if he reached me, no one would notice right away. People would assume we were together, just two customers walking through a Walmart. That thought terrified me more than anything else, because it meant he knew exactly what he was doing. I rounded the corner into the cleaning supplies aisle, hoping to put some distance between us. The shelves were tall, stacked with boxes and bottles, and the narrow aisle made it feel like a tunnel. I thought maybe I could lose him by ducking behind something. That's when I heard it, a soft shuffle, then a whispered, almost casual voice. "Hey, I know you're there." My stomach dropped. He was close. Too close. I ducked behind a stack of paper towels and pressed my back against the cold metal shelf. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I debated calling 911, but didn't want him to know. One sound from me, and he'd know exactly where I was. I could see the shadow of his body between the shelves, moving slowly. He paused directly across from where I hid. I held my breath. My heart was hammering so loud, I thought he would hear it. Then he moved again, deliberately, almost casually, like he had all the time in the world. He crouched slightly, peeking around the end of the shelf. His eyes scanned the aisle, and I could feel the intensity of his gaze through the stacks of cleaning supplies. I realized I had only one choice. I had to run. I bolted. My feet slipped on the tile as I pushed my cart forward, but I didn't stop. He was right behind me now. I could hear the shuffle of his shoes, the snap of a box being nudged by his hand as he tried to catch up. I turned down another aisle, the bright lights making my eyes sting after the dim shadows of the cleaning aisle. He was still there, still moving, not shouting, not running, just following, patient and deliberate. I reached the front of the store and shouted for help. Employees turned quickly, some frozen in shock, others moving toward me. He hesitated at the edge of the aisles, watching as if he wasn't ready to leave. I slammed the glass door behind me and ran to the parking lot. I called 911 as I reached the safety of my car. I could hear him moving back toward the store, but I didn't look. The adrenaline made my hands shake violently as I fumbled with my keys. When I finally got inside and locked the doors, I could hear the faint sound of footsteps still echoing near the entrance. I wanted to leave immediately, but I stayed long enough for the police to arrive. Officers arrived minutes later, questioning employees and searching the store. They found him hiding in a supply closet, crouched and calm, like nothing had happened. A knife was tucked into his waistband. The realization hit me hard. He had been inside the store all along, waiting, watching, and planning. And if I hadn't bolted when I did, I wouldn't have made it out safely. After the police caught him, I thought the nightmare was over. I watched as they led him out in handcuffs, calm, expressionless, like nothing I'd experienced mattered to him. The officers began questioning employees and reviewing security footage. That's when the first shocking detail came up. The man hadn't just followed me by chance. He had been banned from that Walmart weeks earlier for suspicious behavior. Employees had reported him lurking near the aisles, but nothing had ever escalated until that night. Even more unsettling, the footage revealed something I hadn't noticed. He had been in the store long before I arrived. Hiding, watching, waiting. Every aisle I walked down, every turn I made, he had already been there. He knew exactly where I would go before I even pushed my cart in that direction. The footage showed him crouching behind displays, moving silently between shelves, observing every small movement. He had been studying me without my knowledge, tracing my path through the store. And the strangest part? He wasn't just following me. He had been following multiple people that evening, employees, late-night shoppers, but I was the one he had singled out. When I asked why, the officers shook their heads. They didn't know.
He didn't speak.
There was no explanation for why he picked me specifically, or how long he had been planning to wait for the perfect moment. I learned that he had a small backpack with tools inside, duct tape, gloves, and the knife found tucked into his waistband. The police said it was clear he had intended to trap someone in the store. What hit me hardest was how organized he had been. He wasn't a random, impulsive person. He had a plan, a strategy. He had been inside the store hours before my arrival, moving quietly, hiding, and timing everything perfectly. It was terrifying to realize how close I had come to being completely unaware of the danger around me. For all that time, I thought I was just shopping alone at night. But in reality, I had been walking through a trap he had set, one aisle at a time. The police never fully understood why he chose that night or why he had targeted me specifically. And for the first time, I realized how much I had taken my sense of safety for granted, how easily it could have been taken away. Even after he was arrested, that thought stayed with me. He had been hiding in plain sight, moving silently, waiting. And the worst part? I still don't know what he would have done if I hadn't noticed him in time. Weeks passed after the incident, but I couldn't shake the memory of that night. I went back to normal life, tried to forget what happened, but it lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow I couldn't escape. I kept thinking about how precise he had been, how long he had been hiding, how calmly he had followed me, without rushing, without panicking, like he had all the time in the world. Even after the arrest, the thought haunted me. What if he wasn't acting alone? What if someone else had been watching the same store, waiting for the same opportunity? The police couldn't answer that. There were no signs of accomplices, but the way he moved, the way he seemed to predict my steps, it didn't feel like the work of one person. I stopped going to that Walmart at night. I started shopping earlier in the day, but even then, every time I walked past a dark aisle or a shadow between shelves, I felt my heart tighten. Every time a customer moved too quietly or lingered too long, I flinched. Sometimes I think I see him when I'm out, just a glimpse in a crowd, a shadow behind a display, someone standing still watching. I know it's probably just my imagination, but the feeling is so real that it's hard to ignore. The scariest part is that I'll never know for sure. Even if he's locked up, even if the store is monitored, the truth is I was followed, studied, hunted. That thought doesn't fade. It doesn't end with the arrest. And some nights, when I pass by that Walmart or see a similar store somewhere else, I feel it again, the awareness that someone could be waiting, watching, planning, quietly, patiently. I still don't know who he really was. I still don't know why he chose me. And sometimes, when the lights are low and the aisles stretch ahead of me, I feel he might still be there, waiting, for the next person who doesn't notice until it's too late. Months have passed since that night, but it never really ended for me. Life moved on the way it always does.
Work. Bills.
Normal routines. On the surface, everything went back to how it was before. But something inside me changed in a way I can't explain to people who weren't there. I replay that night often. Not the running, not the shouting, the quiet parts. The way he followed without making mistakes. The way he waited. What scares me most is how easily it could have gone differently. If I had stayed calm a little longer, if I had ignored that feeling in my chest, if I had gone into a darker aisle or toward the back restrooms instead of the front. There are too many small choices that could have ended everything. The police told me the case was closed. They said he was in custody, that I was safe, that I should try to move on. But there were things they couldn't answer. They couldn't tell me how many nights he had done this before. They couldn't tell me how many people he had watched and decided not to follow. And they couldn't tell me how he knew exactly where to stand so no one would notice him on camera for so long. A few weeks after the incident, I went back once during the day. I told myself I needed closure.
The store looked the same.
Same aisles, same lights, same sounds. People walked past me without knowing anything had happened there. I stood in the cleaning supplies aisle for a moment, the exact spot where I hid. Nothing felt different, and that was the worst part. I realized how easy it was for someone to disappear in plain sight. How many shadows existed even under bright lights. How safety was something I had assumed, not something guaranteed. Since then, I've noticed things I never paid attention to before. People standing still for too long. Someone turning when I turn. A car parked with its engine running and no one getting out. Most of the time, it's nothing. But sometimes, the feeling comes back. That quiet awareness. The same one I felt before I ever saw him. I still shop at stores. I still live my life. But I don't browse anymore. I don't scroll on my phone in public places. I always know where the exits are. I listen for footsteps that don't match mine. Because what happened to me wasn't about Walmart. It was about timing. It was about someone waiting for the right moment. And the hardest truth I've learned is this. If I hadn't noticed him when I did, no one would have known until it was too late.
I don't know where he is now.
I don't know if he's locked up, released, or watching someone else somewhere else. All I know is this. The next time you're in a place that feels normal, bright lights, people around, a routine stop you've made 100 times, pay attention to the quiet things. Because sometimes, danger doesn't rush. It waits.